Hello and welcome to this edition of 18 WJTS in.form. I'm your host, Bill Potter. Every now and then we will have somebody from SWICACC, which is the Southwest Indiana Coalition. Well, you know what? Let's just find out by talking to Tammy, because I can never get that acronym right. Joining us is Tammy Lampert, who's the director of SWICACC in this area, and also from the Indiana State Police, Detective Shane Staggs. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Okay, Tammy, SWICACC, Southwest Indiana
Child Advocacy Center Coalition.
That's what it is, which briefly is what?
We provide a safe place for children who are victim of abuse so that they can come and disclose of what happened to them.
Okay, so don't feel like me, you have to remember the whole name.
No.
Just remember SWICACC, or just that this program is even available.
Yes.
And today we're going to take a look at it from the policing use as a tool, that SWICACC provides a tool for police to use. So if you would tell us a little history of Detective Shane Staggs.
Detective Shane Staggs. I call him a rock star. Okay. He does a great job. So Detective Staggs is tasked with the investigation of child abuse crime. And so he is one of our team members. He comes to the forensic interviews and he investigates those cases, the allegations of child abuse.
And you have 4 locations where you do these forensic interviews.
We do. We have a location in Milltown, Washington, Rockport, and Jasper.
Now, a forensic interview sounds pretty complicated, but really it's you speaking to the child in a room, and then in another room that's where attorneys or prosecutors or police are watching to get evidence.
Yeah, so the law enforcement, Department of Child Services, and prosecutors are able to watch that interview live so that they can see the child's disclosure, they can make their notes, they can figure out where they need to go from there. Okay,
Detective, now if you could tell us, why is this an important tool?
For us, the interview is basically evidence. From my standpoint, I have to be able to prove certain elements of the crime, and with Tammy and Felicia doing the interviews, they're able to, have a conversation with the child that I wouldn't be able to have, whether they're, intimidated or afraid of the police. Tammy's able to, get the information from the child as far as what happened, where it happened. So for us, it's evidence, so we can, go interview the suspect, and we already know what has occurred.
So basically, I guess in the interview, you'll find out that a child was abused at a certain place by somebody. Then you get that information, and then you can go and confront them and say, yes, we know that you did this on this day and this date, and hopefully you can get a confession or get a charge.
Yes, and then we'll, if the child gives other details, that allows me to be able to basically show, corroborate what they're saying with what I've found. And yeah, I mean, it's huge with interviewing a suspect because, it's the child's words that what happened to them. So it helps a lot with the interviews with the suspect.
Well, the child is, I'm sure, stressed anyway because of the situation that they're in. So just talking to Tammy makes it easy. Whereas I'm sure with being a police officer, probably the abuser has told them don't talk to the police, or has maybe taught them to be afraid of the police.
Yeah, I would say in the majority of the cases, the victim has at some point been told, don't tell anyone. If you tell anyone, I'm going to get in trouble, or you're going to get in trouble, and the child's led to believe that. I mean, so whenever they talk to Tammy, it's more of a relaxed setting, and they're not talking to a police officer who the child thinks, well, they're going to get the suspect in trouble or me in trouble, and it's but I'm able to be there to get all the information that they've disclosed.
Now, when we talk again about a child, I like to sometimes qualify what is a child.
We talk to anybody. I've talked to kids as young as 2 all the way up to 17. Yeah, okay. I've even talked to, and I think Shane was even there for those, adults that are special needs that function at a child level. Okay. We've talked to them also because it seems to help them to be able to communicate what happened.
Is it important that these folks that you're interviewing who have been abused don't have to go through multiple interviews?
It is. It reduces the trauma. Every time that they go through an interview, they have to tell their story, which is traumatic for them. The other thing is that depending on who's asking the questions, everybody asks questions differently. Everybody's, their words are different, their demeanor's different, and everything like that. So if you have one person doing the interview, the child, the goal of the interview is that the child narrates the entire interview, that you're not even having to ask the questions to pull that information. And so if Shane says, to the child, was the couch red, green, or blue, and you're talking to a 3-year-old and they said blue, and the child doesn't know their colors, but then I say, what color was the couch? And they say, oh, it was red. Then it looks like she gave conflicting stories because she told Shane it was blue, but she told me it was red.
Right.
And so then when you add in even more people talking to the kids, asking different types of questions, it's gonna make the child appear that they're inconsistent, where they're not the one that's inconsistent. The adults talking to them were inconsistent in their questions.
Can this be used as evidence, this interview?
It is evidence, yeah. The only ones that will get a copy of the interview is Department of Child Services and law enforcement, because it is considered evidence for their investigations, for their assessments.
Okay, and so you can then glean information from this interview that helps you to make your case. Is that right?
Yes, a lot of times the victim will say, describe a room or, certain things that occurred, and that allows me to be able to, when I'm interviewing a suspect, be able to corroborate what the child said with what the suspect is saying, so we can get the full story of what actually occurred.
Now, these are because bad things are happening to kids. I'm sure you're working to get a turnaround pretty quick, but I'm sure that takes several days to get some things done. Because I guess the story, first of all, has to come to the prosecutor or the judge before they go to you? How do you get the child?
So everybody in Indiana is required to report if they have any suspicion of abuse or neglect. I tell everybody to dual report, which means to report to the DCS hotline, which is 800-800-5556.
And when we say DCS, the Department of Child Services.
Yes.
Okay.
And also to report to law enforcement, because each agency has different criteria and policies and procedures. And so if a call comes through the Department of Child Services hotline, it may get screened out. However, if it comes through to law enforcement may be like, no, I think we need to look into that. And the same thing, it may go to law enforcement and it might not be actually criminal, as opposed to it just might be like the child's safety or something. So I always tell everybody to dual report. And as soon as either law enforcement or DCS gets that report, they're calling me and we're setting up an interview. We don't do the interview as soon as the call comes in sometimes. If the child is safe, if the abuse occurred 2 years ago or something like that, and the child is safe, then we might schedule it for a day out. But this morning I got a call, and when I leave here, we're going to go do an interview.
Okay, so sometimes you don't know, and I guess it depends on the case?
It depends on the case. It depends on the safety of the child. We want to make sure that the child is safe. If the perpetrator's in the home with the child, we're going to get him in there as quickly as we can, whether that be an hour after the call, that night, the weekend, holiday, so. Okay,
so it's when it's an emergency, and you got to go and take care of it.
Yes.
But some of it could be old.
We've had some cases.
Some of them are years.
Where, and it's funny, a lot of times if somebody's not talking to that child and asking them, has somebody done something not okay, or giving them permission to tell, they won't tell right away. Or if you have younger children, they don't even know what happened wasn't okay.
Right. They may not realize it until they're 10, 15 years old.
So that's why, it's just really important to talk to the kids and say, if somebody does something not okay, you tell. I yesterday told a little girl, who could you tell? And it was, I could tell teacher, I could tell counselor, I could tell mom, I could tell dad. And I said, you keep telling until somebody helps you. Because unfortunately, she could tell somebody and they may not believe her. Or she could tell somebody and they don't protect her. So you keep telling until you get somebody to help you.
Detective, if this didn't exist, this opportunity didn't exist to hear the child's story through somebody else who's just talking to them, how much harder would your job be?
Very hard. I don't know how to put a price tag on what it offers us. We wouldn't have nearly the disclosures that we do have if we didn't have, SWICACC, and then we wouldn't be able to prosecute nearly as many people as we're able to now without having that. It'd make it impossible almost.
Now, and we've talked about this before, and I've talked about it with people with Crisis Connection. these sorts of things, do they really happen in my neighborhood?
Absolutely. That's the sad part about it. They happen in every single community in the, I mean, we have, what, 6 counties?
7.
7 counties, and they happen in every single community that, you know, and sometimes it's people that you think wouldn't, you know, would never do that, and it does.
So the point is to get this stopped for the child and make it as easy for the child as possible, because they've already gone through a lot of trauma. But then there are tough questions and tough things you need to know, because you can't go and do your job unless you get that information.
Yeah, it's a difficult process. The child already has, you know, trauma, and you're trying not to create more trauma for the child, and that's what SWICACC enables us to do. You know, do it with the least amount of trauma to the child, and not, you know, keep bringing it up and bringing it up. But it also allows us to be able to do our job and prosecute these cases.
All right. Well,
And we asked some really tough questions in the interview. Really, I mean, a lot of details. And what's nice about this setting, and what's nice about having the trained professional to do the interview, is that I don't react and gasp when a child tells me something that maybe deep down I want to. And it allows them to just talk about it almost like in what a sense is normal for them, to just get it out, as opposed to if they would tell somebody else and they would gasp or they would cry, or, you know, or they would have that reaction there, because that reaction is also going to play in what they're able to say. If they see that they're upsetting you, they may shut down and not say anything else. You know, and to kind of touch on what Shane said, if we didn't have SWICACC, because SWICACC's the only organization that provides those services to those 7 counties, the kids would have to, if you want them to go to a child advocacy center, they would have to go to Evansville, Bloomington, Corydon. I think those are the 3 closest ones that we have. And or where that might not be feasible for our families or for our team members, then the child would have to go to, you know, the police post, talk to the cop, then go to the DCS office, talk to DCS, and then, you know, I mean, it's just...
And they've already talked to somebody else in the first place, a principal, a teacher, a parent, an uncle.
If they made a disclosure that was reported, they've already told somebody already, yeah.
So no matter what, you're basically the second interview. You just don't want to make them go through that 3rd and 4th interview.
Yeah, and it just allows us to, everybody be involved for one interview.
And from the beginning.
Yeah, and so everybody's all on the same page.
How do you hold yourself back, and how do you hold yourself back when you know what's happened? That's got to be tough.
Well, I mean, you have to. It's, you know, you have to put all your personal feelings aside whenever I'm interviewing someone, and just have a conversation, you know, one-on-one, and you put all your feelings aside and realize that as disgusting or, you know, what you feel about it, it's best for the child if I'm professional and...
Right. That's your job.
Yeah,
that's
put
what you
those
do.
feelings aside.
And I realize my opinion doesn't matter, you know? My opinion doesn't matter, and I need to make sure that I stay as neutral and calm as I can so that the child feels comfortable to talk.
And you get to watch from another room and glean the information.
Yep.
Well, thanks to both of you for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
SWICACC is, again...
Southwestern Indiana Child Advocacy Center Coalition.
Okay, so SWICACC does great work and is just a tool that the police can use in their investigations of abuse or neglect. Okay, and what terrible things those are, but they do happen in every neighborhood. And remember, you are responsible to call the DCS or the local law enforcement if you see or know of something. Thanks to Tammy Lampert and to Detective Shane Staggs with the Indiana State Police. Tammy is with SWICACC. Thank you for watching WJTS. We're local people watching local people.